kidding. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for being here today. We are so excited to share some amazing information with you from Carrie Palmer. First thing, couple housekeeping. I am Dr. Ellen, and I will be your host today. If you do have any questions, please utilize the chat function. You'll find that button at the bottom of your screen. And once you click on that, it will open up a window off to the right where you can type in any questions either directly to me or you can address them to everyone. You can select who you want to see that. But if you do have questions for Carrie along the way, please place them there so I can organize them for her and make this nice and streamlined and flow very, very well. The other part is everyone will be muted at this time, just so that if dogs are barking or kids are in the background, we want to just make sure we respect everybody's time and ears in here so that we can give Carrie the floor. So for those of you who have not met Carrie yet, you guys are in for an amazing treat. She is an incredible wealth of knowledge in so many areas, not just the immune system, but I think you're going to find that not only is your mind going to be blown by a few things, but you're going to have some takeaway information that you can start to work into your life right away to maximize your immune system and your health, especially during this time. So, and I can't thank you enough from the bottom of my heart for being here for this. This is the first of our series. So if you like this, make sure to tune back, check out our website and our Facebook. We'll be posting these videos as well as different events that we're going to be bringing on other speakers to help everybody in this time. And it's free. So make sure you share with your friends and your family and bring them on. We would love to share this information with everybody. So I'm going to turn the floor to Carrie to start, to give her a chance to let her know, or let you guys know how she started to get into functional medicine, where her passion derives from, because she's got an amazing story. So thank you so much, Carrie, for being here. The floor is yours.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you so much, Ellen. This is an incredible way to reach out to all of us when we're desperate for community anyway. But the one blessing with this is that we do have a little bit of time sometimes to address some of these issues that need to be addressed. So the gift of time is sometimes a benefit. So once again, my name is Carrie Palmer. I'm a physician assistant. I've been practicing for over 15 years. And I work in a field called functional medicine. I'm the provider and owner of Insight Functional Medicine, and I blessedly live in Ellen's space 2 days a week. We work together, but I work in functional medicine, which is basically patient-centered care versus disease-focused. Meaning, when I see patients in my office, I am looking at the entire picture. I'm looking at all symptoms, all body systems, and the entire social picture, emotional picture, spiritual picture, in addition to the physical picture, to really look for the root cause of health concerns or issues and how we can try to optimize health. And I came upon this field about 7 years ago when my family, specifically with my youngest son, we went through some pretty significant health crises. It's a very long story, but to make it short and sweet, when he was born, shortly after he was born, we dealt with some pretty significant GI issues, specifically significant heartburn that didn't allow either him or I to sleep or really to be comfortable much of the time. But then that led to subsequent diarrhea, weight loss or lack of weight gain. This persisted for over a year, and we did a lot of doctor hopping trying to figure out what was going on and what we could do to help him, with a little bit of help, but in the end didn't really get anywhere significant. And so I was left with Dr. Google in the middle of the night when I was rocking him, trying to help him fall back asleep, just like many of us desperate parents are, and actually initially found the paleo diet, but then through the paleo diet found the field of functional medicine and started implementing it in his and my own family's life, and started seeing some amazing differences in our own health. And then at that point, felt like I was keeping this dirty little secret to myself as I was working in my general surgery practice. So thankfully, my supervising doc at the time was 100% on board and actually was kind of going through the same process that I was with his own family members. And so together we started doing some formal training and ultimately ended up in this field. So been working professionally in this field for over 6 years now, and I absolutely adore working with my patients closely. We work as a team, and I just have seen some amazing results. So, but this is an incredibly important field right now in the current climate we're in, because as I'm going to explain in this presentation, I've got a short little PowerPoint that I'm going to walk through. But basically, when we look at addressing the root cause of all of our health issues, one of those core elements is actually the immune system. And right now, against this silent, invisible enemy that we're fighting, the immune system is key. So at this point, I'm going to share my screen here, as long as this works the way that I want it to. Are we good, Ellen?
You were rolling. Perfect.
Perfect. All right. So, yeah, what brings us all here today is trying to figure out how to optimize our own defensive response against this invisible enemy that we've all kind of been put up against recently. So, briefly, COVID-19. You probably have all heard, a bunch of information about this, but I just wanted to make sure we were all kind of on the same page before I went too deep into the whole immune process and structure. And for those of you who have worked with Ellen has probably at some point told you guys that she likes to nerd out on physics. There's a reason Ellen and I get along very well, many reasons, but one reason is I really like to nerd out on the gut. So I apologize right now, but I'm going to drag you into that with me. At any point, please feel free to put in the chat if you need something explained further, if you have any questions, because I wish I could have more responsiveness. So yeah, so let me know if at any point I need to explain anything further, but I'm going to kind of walk you through this process here. So COVID-19 is a virus, and one of the biggest issues with this virus right now is that it is brand new to our immune system. Our immune system, from the day we're born, is working on becoming adaptive to our own environment, and it's constantly learning. And every single thing that it's exposed to, it's learning and adapting and creating new immune cells to help combat other infections that we've been exposed to in the past, all of these issues. The problem that we have with COVID-19 is that our body has never seen anything that's incredibly similar. So when any of us is exposed to this virus, we're kind of only working with half of our immune system, the immune system that helps us target kind of anything, but we don't have any memory cells that can say, oh yeah, I've seen that before, let's ramp things up. So this is causing more issue and more apprehension even in the medical community, because we realize that this is potentially a big issue. So when we're exposed to viruses, as we've all been preached to, the biggest ways that it enters our body, the main ways it enters our body, is through our nose, our mouth, or our eyes. And the reason for that is that viruses really need to go into a mucous membrane, one of those soft, squishy, mucus-containing cellular membranes, to really be acquired into the body. Unlike bacteria, viruses are not living. They're a cellular structure. It's an oil-covered glob of RNA, or genetic material, but it's not really living in and of itself. What it needs to do is that virus needs to adhere to one of your own cells on the mucous membrane, and then it assimilates into that cell, and that RNA, that genetic material, gets expressed into our own cell. Then our own cell becomes a viral factory. That RNA then tells our cell, forget what you were doing before, you need to make more of me. And so it starts to replicate and continue to make more and more sources of RNA. Eventually that cell dies and ruptures and releases all of these brand new viral particles. And then those viral particles disseminate through the rest of the body, or are coughed or sprayed out, and continue that process. So these viruses basically hijack our own body's cellular structures. So how does our body provide defense against this? Why do we not get every virus that we are exposed to? And the biggest immune factor that kind of protects us in a scenario like this is something called the MALT, or the mucosa-associated lymphoid tissue. And this is seen throughout any mucosal surface in our body. So once again, nose and sinuses, in the bronchioles, in the lungs, in the GI tract, even in the urinary tract, we've got kind of this mucosal layer of immune cells that provide that first string of defense. It's kind of the first thing that they see. And when we have a robust immune system, sometimes that's all we need. Those cells see something that it doesn't like and immediately captures it and tries to isolate it before it can do any significant damage. Well, 70 to 80% of this immune system resides inside of our gut. When I say our gut, I mean basically the gut is anything from the mouth all the way to the anus. But especially our immune system is largely concentrated in our small intestine, which is, when you look at pictures of the abdominal cavity, that twisty, turvy, smaller tubular structure kind of in the middle of the abdomen. And that's where a lot of our immune system lies. That surface area where those immune cells are laying on that mucosal surface, they cover the same square footage of a tennis court. So that is how much of our body's immune system, our body's tissue, is exposed to the exterior world. Because really, when we ingest something and when things travel down this tube that is our GI tract, it's still technically outside of our body. That tissue that encapsulates that empty space inside of our GI tract is still outside of our body. Things have to be absorbed to then be in our tissue. So that immune system defense lining that mucosa in our GI tract, 70 to 80% of it is right there. And we need it to be strong and potent and durable. So the immune cells throughout the body are constantly communicating. So if something gets into our nasal cavity and signals or sets off immune cells here, there are a number of different other immune cells that are messenger cells, things like cytokines that you might have heard about in the news. They've talked a little bit about that, but interleukins, other messenger cells that then are constantly communicating with the rest of the body, saying, hey, we've got a problem here. You down in the GI tract, we have to step things up. So all of this is connected, right? But 70, 80% of it is largely in the gut. So this is where, okay, we're gonna nerd out a little bit. Don't worry, don't get too intimidated. I'm not gonna go into absolutely all of this detail, but this is an image of the GI tract basically, and it's a cross section. So I think you guys can see my arrow here. But this white space here with what looks like little poops basically, this is the intestinal lumen, or that space where food and everything else travels through. And these are just images of those little bacteria or the microbiome that we have inside of our gut. And I'm going to talk about that a lot more too. But so this space is still technically, where'd my arrow go? This space still technically is outside of the body. This tan thin line here that is kind of wavy, this space, that is our barricade. This is our cellular layer that protects us from everything that floats through that tube there. So this is where we have lines of cells that help us absorb, and I'm going to talk more about that very soon. But this also is where we have a number of lymphocytes or immune cells right integrated into that cellular layer so that they can keep an eye out. They're kind of our watchdogs, or some of our guards that are constantly surveying what's going through here and able to receive certain things that it's confused or concerned about, and then directly communicate with other portions of our immune system like Peyer's patches or these lymphocytic follicles, but basically larger conglomerates of immune tissue that then can create a more comprehensive response. And this is all, one of the reasons I shared this with you is this is all right at that mucosal layer, right at that cell layer that's right on the surface. So that immune system is all integrated right there. And that's our first response. That's where everything kind of stems from. So it's important that this remains very healthy in order to really optimize our body's immediate response to something that's concerning. I hope this makes sense. And please, Ellen or anyone else, tell me if I need
I
to
think you're
clarify.
doing a wonderful job. But again, if anybody has questions, please feel free to use that chat section. I will grab all of it there. And also, if anybody is not seeing this in a large enough view, you do have the ability to toggle between the presenter view as well as the speaker view. And so up on the top right-hand side, you'll see a couple different options for your viewing. So just so you know, if you want to see Carrie's slides a little bit better, go ahead and play with those and click speaker view, and that will bump it up into a larger view so that you can see it a little better.
Perfect. So the importance of the immune system. Obviously, we're all here because we're trying to figure out how to optimize our immune response to the virus that is currently out there. And that is one crucial aspect of our immune system, right? It protects us from all those bad bacteria, from the viruses, even from chemicals or toxins or anything else that's inundating us from our atmosphere or from our environment. But our immune system controls more than just that. Our immune system, as I already alluded to at the beginning, our immune system is learning from the very day we're born as to what's okay and doesn't need to be reacted or responded to, and what's not okay. And that's a very delicate process and relies on several different things, including, once again, the gut bacteria that I'm going to talk about in just a minute. But it's an incredibly important aspect of maintaining optimal health, and that can go awry depending on what's going on. Initially, when that tolerance starts to get confused, this is what contributes to more and more allergies, not only environmental, but food allergies or even other food reactions or sensitivities, eczema, those sorts of things. And then kind of the ultimate intolerance that we can develop when our immune system goes awry is an autoimmune disorder, where our own immune system gets so confused and so overreactive that it starts to react to our own tissue that it usually is incredibly tolerant of and very accepting of. But if it's too inflamed, if it's too confused, if there's too much going on, it can start to turn against our own cellular tissue and cause damage in and of itself. So this is another important reason to really regulate and maintain our immune system health. Our immune system is also a crucial part of the inflammatory response. And when I talk about inflammatory, it doesn't necessarily have to be infectious. If we cut our hand on something outside, even if it's not infected, we still notice a little bit of redness, a little bit of swelling, a little bit of tenderness. And all of that is due to inflammation. It's due to our immune system sending cells to that area saying, we have damage, we need to send cellular structures there to repair it. And that creates a little bit of an inflammatory response, and then it resolves as that heals, right? But when we have inflammation elsewhere in the body, it's the exact same aspect. It's the exact same thing occurring, whether it's inflammation in the joint due to joint damage that your body's trying to repair, or an inflammatory skin reaction. So our immune system helps to govern the inflammatory response and how long it goes on for, if it's a short-lived inflammation or if it's a longer-term inflammation. And then the immune system also just serves as a regulator or a policeman or a trash or cleanup crew. So the immune system is constantly scouting out the body, looking for aberrant or dysfunctional cell growth. Our cells are dividing, a million times over all the time. And it's an imperfect process. Sometimes when cells divide, things go a little awry, and then that tissue continues to change. And our immune system is constantly looking for these and trying to rein it in, or, trying to then basically dissolve damaged cells and help heal and rejuvenate and rein in even precancerous cell changes. So that is also an important aspect of our immune health, is just maintaining that homeostasis. So lots of reasons to think about our immune system, not just this COVID crisis we're dealing with right now. So we're all here to talk about, how do we strengthen this army of our immune system? How do we really make ourselves more resilient? And in the end, what I'm always advocating, even with chronic health issues, is treat the host, treat the patient, treat the person, not the pathogen in this case, not COVID, not a disease process, I'm looking at actually trying to make our own bodies more resilient so that when influenza comes around next year and it's a terrible strain and people are getting ill left and right, your system is just as resilient as it was to COVID. Or when some other pandemic pops up, there's more and more talk about, with environmental changes, climate changes, that this sort of new virus might be a bigger problem. So just trying to, instead of panicking and trying to figure out every single enemy that's approaching us, doing what we can to optimize our own body's response to any of these. And in the end, what I learned about 8 years ago when I was dealing with my sweet baby boy's issues, is that Hippocrates in 400 BC was right. All disease really does generally begin in the gut. And once again, one of the biggest reasons that is because 70 to 80% of the immune system is in the gut. And this is something in functional medicine that we absolutely hammer out, but it's amazing to me still that way before microbiology and microscopes and chemistry knowledge and everything else, Hippocrates was right on. So I'm all about telling stories and creating images. Part of my patient population are children, so I like them to understand what I'm dealing with too, but I just do better with pictures. So one of the ways that I describe this issue is our own body is our castle, and we want to protect our own body from anything outside that might want to pillage, might want to damage, might want to cause any sort of assault. So we want to allow certain things in, but we want to make sure that we're protected from everything else. And that involves literally a castle wall, a brick wall that provides a sturdy defense, but then also some important castle guards that really help us, help kind of provide that additional barrier, that sentinel that's keeping watch, basically. So I've shown you a glimpse of that castle wall, and I'm going to talk a lot more about that. But as far as the castle guards go, it's not just us. So we all have anywhere from 10 to 100 trillion different microbes living inside of our body. And we really are still only scratching the surface on all of the different aspects of our health that those microbes play a role in. We're talking bacteria, we're talking viruses, we're talking fungal elements, maybe even some other little, worms or other cellular structures that for some of us are commensal, meaning they help us. The bacteria alone significantly help to increase our immune tolerance, meaning helps to train our immune system appropriately, what's good and shouldn't be reacted to, and what's not so good and shouldn't and needs a response. It also helps the bacteria alone help to secrete some immune cells called secretory IgA molecules that serve as additional sentinels or castle guards on top of the castle wall. So that's just the immune system alone. And then there's a ton of research linking the microbiome and the bacteria and how they communicate with the brain. The bacteria are largely involved in digesting and absorbing a bunch of micronutrients like vitamin B, vitamin D. They also produce at least 70% of the serotonin, or the feel-good happy hormone in your body. This is a whole nother lecture. I could go on for hours, but these guys are crucial to our gut health. And we'll talk a little bit more about what to do to optimize those as well. But we are gathering and growing our microbes, once again, from the moment we're born. Depending on how we're born, depends on which bacteria we're exposed to initially, and then all of our life experiences, all of our dietary choices, all of our medication and antibiotic exposures, all make a difference in how this is composed over time. So we'll talk more about that as well. So another picture of this is that same cellular structure that I showed you in the other picture. It's just a shorter segment, and the immune system is left out of this for some clarity. But my guess is by this point, many of you, maybe not all of you, have heard about leaky gut or intestinal permeability. This is one of the cores of what I do. This is one of the things that I focus on in basically every single patient that walks through my door. And this image is basically showing that we have literally one cell layer that separates all of the stuff that's floating through the small intestine. Once again, this is that space where all of the food, all of the poo, all of the bacteria, everything is floating through. And this cell layer protects us from our own bloodstream. Once again, you can remember our own immune system that's back here. So we need to protect our castle. We need this cell layer to be our brick wall. We need strong, healthy cells, and we need these cells to be joined by what we literally call tight junctions, or very tight protein structures that glue these cells together. And through those protein structures, and actually through the cells themselves, there are specific transport mechanisms that allow certain nutrients, things like potassium, magnesium, vitamin D, proteins, that sort of thing through, and allows them to assimilate into our cells well and help us heal and nourish and grow. But it keeps everything else out. It says, no, you're not allowed in here. We don't recognize you, move along. So it keeps everything else out. What can happen, as you see on the right-hand side here, for a variety of different reasons that I'm going to talk about in just a second, those cells can become really inflamed, start to break down, even start to die off, leaving spaces. But also those tight junction, this mortar basically that helps to glue those brick cells together, starts to break down. And now, instead of a castle wall, we have a picket fence. There's a reason 14th century castles weren't covered by picket fences. It's a really poor defense. And so at this point, not only are we losing some of the transport mechanisms that we need to correctly assimilate the good nutrients that we're supposed to absorb, but also we've got a whole myriad of other things just flooding through that castle wall. And that can include a bunch of virus load that we've been exposed to recently, bacteria, good and bad. It can be less than ideally digested food product, like a chunk of carrot or mashed potato that gets through. Once it hits our immune system on the other side, the immune system goes crazy, and rightfully so. There's a breach and there's a ton of stuff floating through. It's not supposed to be there. Get out. And there's a huge response locally that then causes inflammation, because once again, an immune response is inflammation. So it causes a huge immune reactionary response. Sometimes, often, actually, to be honest, we have some GI symptoms with that if it goes on for any extended period of time. Sometimes it can be things as mild as some abdominal bloating or gassiness, a little bit of diarrhea or constipation, inconsistency in stool, some nausea. Can be as extreme, obviously, as, blood in the stool, significant abdominal pain, really bad diarrhea, those sorts of things. But once again, inflammation is basically fire, and fire spreads, as we've seen in Australia and California more recently. Unless we do something to actively quell that inflammatory response, or something to close those borders so that we're not getting this constant influx of all of these less than ideal particles or particulate, that inflammation just continues and propagates. And our immune system in our gut continues to send inflammatory signals elsewhere to the body to warn the body something's not right, and we've got to mount a response. And then sometimes too, some of these substances aren't necessarily caught locally and will travel around in the bloodstream and travel to other areas of the body, and then cause an immune or an inflammatory response elsewhere. This is where, once again, for some of the patients that I see, when they come in complaining of rheumatoid arthritis or bad eczema or terrible chronic migraines or that sort of thing, I start to say, we need to look at these areas, and we need to look at a lot of other things. But one of the very first things we need to look at as well is the gut, because
Carrie,
inflammation starts there. Yes.
On that same topic, we had somebody ask a really good question about touching into some of the autoimmune type conditions. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of what you're expanding on right there. So is there anything in particular somebody with an autoimmune issue should be aware of,
Um,
considering what you're saying? I think it's kind of a lead in.
So yes, no, absolutely. So anyone with an autoimmune issue, we believe with extensive research done specifically in celiac disease alone, to have an autoimmune issue, you need three things. You need a genetic predisposition. You need some sort of trigger. Now, specifically for celiac disease, that's gluten. But there are a number of other autoimmune diseases that we found certain bacterial triggers. There are a number of different things that trigger can be. But the third thing we need is leaky gut or intestinal permeability, this right here. So if you have an autoimmune disease, we basically guarantee that we have leaky gut. And this is how somebody with two parents with celiac disease can get away without having celiac disease themselves, because if they don't have this leaky gut issue, we don't cycle into that full-blown autoimmune response. Does this make sense?
Makes total
Um,
sense. If anybody
so,
has any further questions on that too, let us know in the chat section.
yeah,
But
please
I
do.
think that could also be another like coursework right in
That's
there.
a whole nother that's a whole nother ball. But once again, I mean, this is all tied in, and this is why I love functional medicine. The body is so intricately tied in. So the reasons intestinal permeability can happen: diet. Standard American diet, unfortunately, is incredibly high in processed oils, processed sugars, simple carbohydrates. All three of those things are not friendly to a healthy microbiome, to a healthy gut bacteria. Our bacteria are at least partly and somewhat largely due to what we eat. Certain bacteria love sugar and carbs. Other bacteria love apples and spinach. And there have been studies showing when we go on our tropical vacation to Hawaii or out on a cruise and we shift from what we're normally eating to fresh fish and lots of fresh fruits, especially tropical fruits, our microbiome makes a huge shift in just 4 to 7 days. So it's amazing how much diet alone can really regulate what our microbiome looks like in and of itself. And once again, that microbiome, those are our guards on top of our castle wall. So it's one crucial aspect of immune health. So diet, if diet is not ideal, that guard wall disappears largely, and there's support for the immune system up there. Also, antibiotics especially, and I am not saying antibiotics are unnecessary. At sometimes they're absolutely necessary at some points. But unfortunately, one of the side effects we have, especially when we're taking them orally, is that they're very good at killing off the gut bacteria just as much as they're good at killing off the pneumonia we have or the ear infection or what have you. So we really want to think consciously if we need to take an antibiotic, when we need to take an antibiotic, about doing the best we can to try to replenish those good gut bacteria. Other medications, specifically things like Motrin, ibuprofen, aspirin, chronically used, can literally cause inflammation of these cells and start to break down those cell junctions. Once again, I'm not saying taking them, occasionally, or even if you have, a virus or, some sort of illness where you need to take it for a short period of time, that's just fine. But for patients who are taking it every single day, that's more concerning. It can really kind of hamper your body's ability to maintain the integrity of this. Infections, that can be gut infections, that can be bacterial, viral. It can also be systemic infections. Any patients, especially who are dealing with things like Lyme disease or certain things like that, I see a fair number in my practice. That can absolutely be detrimental to the gut microbiome. Stress. Anybody stressed recently? That's a whole nother lecture. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as well. But cortisol, Mother Nature made cortisol to increase rapidly and go right to our heart and lungs and muscles largely, so that we can run away from the saber-toothed tiger into a cave and or lift a car off a child. But then once the danger is gone, cortisol is supposed to go back down. We're supposed to relax and go on our merry way. And that doesn't happen anymore, even before COVID, but especially right now. And when we have excess cortisol flowing at all times, it tends to go here and to the gut. And cortisol on the gut is incredibly harmful, especially if it's in higher and higher doses. It can absolutely cause injury to the cellular structure. It significantly changes our gut microbiome, which once again then affects our guards in that cellular structure. So it can be a huge problem and something that we absolutely need to address. And then other chemicals and toxins. And this is something I worry about with anybody who walks in my office, especially after the whole PFAS thing exploded in the Parchment area last summer. I mean, at this point, not only do I worry about what we're exposed to in, highly processed foods, in preservatives, that sort of thing, but now I'm wondering what's in our water sources, what's in our air, especially in metropolitan areas. I mean, there are lots of things that we're exposed to that we don't even necessarily realize. So that's definitely something that I'm always kind of looking at. So along the lines of somebody who has an autoimmune disease, or any of us who wants to optimize our immune health and optimize overall health, what do we do if and when we have leaky gut? And there are things we can do, and this is what I'm going to talk about. This is something, once again, I address with every single one of my patients, and I always talk about the 5R plan, and those 5Rs are listed right there. But there are absolutely fundamental things that we can do and you can do without seeing a provider that really help to impact our own gut and therefore our own immune system health. And I'm going to talk about a few of those today. So the very first thing is decreasing inflammation from that tube itself. So decreasing as much of the inflammatory sources that flow through there and affect or insult that cell barrier. One of the best ways to do that is to really focus on eating whole food products. It's impossible to limit all processed foods, and that's not at all what I'm advocating. But as much as we can really focus on taking whole foods and making meals out of those, the easier it's going to be to really eat from an anti-inflammatory standpoint. The fewer ingredients, the better, basically. And almost all of us can benefit from increasing our plants in our diet, fruits and vegetables. Ideally, at least 5 to 6 servings a day. Often that means making sure that we even try to get vegetables in at breakfast, which sometimes is a little counterintuitive and difficult to do, but making an egg bake with veggies in it, or an egg scramble with veggies in it, or some way to incorporate more plants even into those types of meals. The other aspect that is a part of that then is, once again, we can't remove all processed foods, and I wouldn't advocate that. I don't do that at home. But when we do eat our more processed foods or our packaged foods, trying to really be careful to limit our sugar intake. And that's not just looking for sugar on a label. Sugar sneaks into so many different foods and beverages, condiments especially. So the very first ingredient in most standard ketchups and barbecue sauce is high fructose corn syrup, even before tomatoes, which shocked me when I noticed that about 7 years ago. So really reading labels, looking for high fructose corn syrup, which is basically chemical type sugar, looking for other sugar byproducts, trying to reduce sugar containing beverages, all of those sources that we just don't even really think about. Also being careful with alcohol use. Once again, I'm not advocating going completely alcohol free, but just being cognizant of the fact that higher levels of alcohol do really cause some detriment to that cellular layer. It does change the microbiome. So just being aware of moderation and being careful about the types of beverages that we ingest. Refined grains. I'm not advocating a grain-free diet to everyone by any means. Now in our household, we eat some grains at times too, but really trying to keep as many of those sources whole grain. And just because Aunt Millie's bread says that it's whole grain does not mean it's whole grain. You really need to be able to see the grains in the bread. But basically, once you grind all of those grains down to a white powder, you lose a lot of the fiber, you lose a lot of the nutrition. So trying to decrease that refined grain source and really go more toward the whole grain source. And then once again, limiting NSAIDs, things like ibuprofen, Motrin, aspirin. A baby aspirin a day, they've done some research on, and generally they don't feel that that makes a significant impact. And once again, the benefits way outweigh the concerns on the gut. And, occasional use is absolutely warranted, but trying to find other replacements for that chronic Motrin use. And once again, Motrin we're using to treat inflammation. It's amazing to me still to this day, once I start adapting diet changes and implementing some other nutrients to help heal and nourish, how many times patients are like, you know what? I don't even need Motrin anymore. I'm amazed at how much just my joints feel better. I don't have headaches as much anymore, So once we decrease inflammation at the source, often we don't need these medications to help moderate that inflammatory response. The other thing that's important is to replenish our army. Those good bugs that we've potentially killed off with courses of antibiotics, or that we've escorted out with not necessarily ideal dietary changes, we can replenish, and we can do that with foods and beverages alone. Things like a good quality yogurt, once again, try to avoid something with a lot of sugar or food dyes, but a good quality yogurt provides a large diverse population of those probiotics. And there are dairy forms, there are even a ton of non-dairy forms out there now for people who can't tolerate dairy very well. Other things like kimchi and sauerkraut, basically cabbage-based products that are truly fermented. I'm not talking about the stuff in the can that they add vinegar to and call sauerkraut. I'm talking about the truly fermented, sat out on grandma's counter for a few weeks and created that good probiotic colony. But that delivers the probiotics as well as fiber, which helps feed those good bacteria. It's a great thing to eat alone, or even add to a bratwurst, or something, hamburger, something that you're eating. And then drinks like kefir or kefir, depending on how you pronounce it, but same idea. That's a dairy or sometimes even a non-dairy based beverage. My kids called it drinking yogurt when they were little, but it's a thinner yogurt type beverage that you literally can drink, that has a very diverse colony. And kombucha is a fermented tea, same idea, large diverse colony. For all of these, especially those last four, sometimes you honestly need a very small amount to get a huge population of bacteria. I've had some patients who have never had kombucha before that drink an entire bottle and walk away a little bit bloated and gassy. And you've just dumped a crap ton of good bacteria. And just like everything, too much of a good thing can sometimes overwhelm the system a little bit too and cause a little bit of discomfort. So I always tell patients, kind of slowly work your way into this to make sure you don't overdo it. You can also take probiotic supplements. That's too is a whole nother conversation and lecture. Quality is crucial, and delivering live bacteria in capsule form is not easy. So just because there's something on the shelves at Walgreens does not mean it's necessarily going to be effective. But if you find a good source, looking for one with lactobacillus and bifidobacter, or even looking for a soil-based organism product, in the end, Mother Nature wants us to get our bacteria from the soil. We're supposed to get it by ingesting fruits and vegetables from our own gardens or from our local farmer, from playing in the dirt, from interacting with nature. That's the way we're supposed to get it. And unfortunately, that doesn't happen as much, but there are now probiotic supplements that kind of try to mimic some of that. And that's a good way to go as well. Third is rebuild our barricade. And that's basically buttressing and building back that brick wall inside of our intestine. And there are a number of different nutrients that we can add in to really help speed up and expedite that process. Omega-3 or fish oil, specifically EPA and DHA, are incredibly anti-inflammatory, even for joint pain, other issues as well. But it's incredibly important to help decrease the inflammation at that cellular level and really help nourish them and heal them. That can be got in fatty fish, salmon, tuna, that sort of thing. You can get precursors also in things like flaxseed, chia seed, and those deliver some beneficial fiber as well. So there are lots of different sources, even without taking a supplement, that you can get those naturally. Glutamine. I don't know, for those of you who've worked with Ellen, and maybe some of you even have a weightlifting background, you might know about glutamine from a perspective of muscle recovery, and it's incredibly beneficial and important for that. But I use glutamine on a daily basis because it is those enterocytes, that cellular wall, it is their favorite food. And it really helps heal and regenerate those cells and really create those stronger bricks again. So you can get that in a bone broth that you make yourself, or a true bone broth that you get, at Meijer or your local grocery store. You can also take a supplement. There's some level in whey protein in beef even, so there are ways to get it through your diet as well. Vitamin A and vitamin D. I told you, Ellen. Told you vitamin D. Vitamin A and vitamin D specifically, also incredibly nourishing to those cells. And there are food sources that you can get, especially the vitamin A in. Cod liver oil obviously is going to give you some of that omega-3 as well. But vitamin D, as Ellen already mentioned, there are supplements you can take that sometimes are absolutely necessary, especially for us Michiganders from about end of October to March. But thankfully, we have now got more and more sun. Vitamin D is best absorbed through the skin by sunlight. So as much as you can get outside safely, and I have a family history of skin cancer, so I take that incredibly seriously. But when you put on sunscreen, you can't absorb vitamin D. So even for my kiddos that I protect with every ounce of my being, I send them out without sunscreen earlier in the morning, later in the afternoon, when the risk of sunburn is much lower, for at least 30 minutes. 30 minutes of sun exposure a day without sunscreen gives you a nice healthy dose of vitamin D that day. And then if I send them out in the early morning, then I rein them back in after 30 or 45 minutes and slather them up with sunscreen and send them back out. But it is important to get that time without sunscreen in order to really absorb that. And then zinc. So zinc.
One quick question, Carrie.
Oh yeah.
We had one quick question about the glutamine.
Yeah.
So sorry to jump back up to there. Is there a good way to get plant-based sources of glutamine? Would you say that more in like a supplemental fashion?
Yeah. So that's, the supplement is going to be the best way to do that then. I would have to look that up. I'm sure there are a couple of plant sources, but then the concentration is going to be much lower too. Then you're going to have to take a crap ton in order to get to a therapeutic dose, especially if we're really looking for concentrated healing. I'm looking at supplementing with 4, sometimes 8 to 12 grams of glutamine for my patients. And, even in bone broth form, that's a fair amount of bone broth. So yeah, it depends on how intensively we're trying to heal. But yeah, I can look that up and see if I can find some other plant-based sources, but otherwise, yeah, a supplement would be the best way to do that. So then zinc. Zinc is also incredibly nourishing for the cells. We actually give some forms of zinc to patients who have pre-ulcerous or gastritis type changes in their stomach. It's incredibly soothing. But zinc is a double, is a double hitter because it also is insanely supportive of the immune cells as well. So those of you who love oysters, kudos to you. I don't, but those are incredibly high in zinc. But also beef, pumpkin seeds, there are other sources that you can get that through food as well.
A couple questions there, Carrie, before you head forward. Somebody was asking about how much zinc is safe to take.
Yeah, so I wondered if that was going to come up. And generally with my patients, 100 milligrams of zinc a day is kind of the limit. So unless I'm truly watching carefully or have reason to feel that a patient is really, really zinc deficient, the most I'm comfortable supplementing in capsule or tablet form is about 50 milligrams a day. Mm-hmm. And once again, if you're working with somebody, sometimes that'll shift or change a little bit, but generally 50 milligrams a day in capsule form. And then, as long as you're eating largely whole food sources, you're going to get more zinc in your diet as well. So that's a fairly safe.
How about a couple questions? There was somebody who was listening to a lecture online who said that a professional recommended avoiding vitamin A and vitamin D if you have COVID, is what they were saying. Have you heard anything about that, and is that accurate?
I have heard about that, and there is so much information about that or out there, and you all know this, you're all inundated with it as well. I'm trying to keep up to date on all of that. And there are some providers who really advocate that vitamin A and D is concerning. There are other providers that are using it in high doses as a therapy. I personally I have increased our vitamin D intake. I mean, up until now, when I'm sending my kids outside, I do not see enough scientific research or evidence that vitamin D is detrimental for this. And looking at the biochemistry, looking at how essential vitamin D is for gut and immune health alone, I don't see how this could cause a problem, especially with as deficient as so many of us in the northern states are. So yeah, I can just tell you personally, in my own family, I am not limiting vitamin D supplementation at all. I'm still sending my kids outside. Now am I giving them 10,000 IU a day? No, I'm not. But but at this point, I and other providers that I generally respect have kind of pulled back on that recommendation of avoiding it and are continuing to supplement, if that's helpful.
Awesome. Just as a heads up, we have just about over 5 minutes left for everybody. So if you guys do have more questions, please shoot them in the chat box. And then when you get some time, Carrie, the last question I have here is about safe or good sunscreen usage.
Oh yeah, that's another actually,
that's another lecture right there.
That is. But what I can say is environmentalworkinggroup.org, EWG.org. They are a large association that has worked for years on looking at all commercial products and grading them on an A to an F grade on safety, basically. And so that is my number one source to look for. Lotions, shampoos, conditioners, cleaning products are on there. Sunscreen is definitely one huge portion that they look at. And I mean, honestly, products change from year to year, right? So something that was good 2 years ago, I can't even guarantee is still good now. I haven't looked recently because I canceled my vacation plans. So, so I don't know. I haven't looked for this year yet. I haven't purchased any. But yeah, that's probably your best source, is to look there. You can't necessarily expect to have everything or to purchase everything that's a grade A. But generally, I figure if it's an A or a B, or sometimes maybe even a high C grade, I'm pretty comfortable. It's amazing how many are D through F. So that's probably your best source to kind of get an idea. All right. So yeah, sorry, I don't have that much more time. So I'm going to have to kind of scoot through here. But as I said, in functional medicine, diet is crucially important. I use supplements in my practice as well, but everything matters. And Ellen, the work you do, this is one reason I'm with Ellen too, is I too completely agree that intentional movement, increasing physical muscle strength, increasing cardiovascular strength is crucial. They have done a number of studies looking at people who exercise 5 days a week versus people who exercise 2 versus people who don't exercise at all. And the incidence of viral infection is much lower in those who exercise regularly. Exercise changes the microbiome independent of anything else that we do. If that's the only thing we change, we see beneficial improvements to the microbiome. It increases endorphins, which then can help us make healthier and better choices later because we feel better. There are just so many benefits to exercise. So it is also incredibly important to help support our system. Sleep. So this is the one thing that we might all have a little more time to do right now since our schedules are a little more open. So this is an important thing to try to optimize. Try to make sure that you get at least 7 to 8 hours. Try to make sure that the quality of your sleep is good. And once again, this is a whole nother lecture, but sleep is incredibly important. While we sleep is when our immune system really can intensely start to heal, start to scavenge and look for those damaged cells, start to repair. This is why when we're sick or after surgical procedures, we're fatigued and we sleep more. It's because our body knows our immune system needs to really work now. So sleep is crucial to help improve our immune health. And then finding Zen, finding peace, finding joy, whatever that means. So once again, as much as sleep may have increased during this crisis, stress has also increased during this crisis for a vast majority of us. And there's only so much we can do about that, but ultimately we do have some control over our response to it. And life is stressful even without coping. And I always talk to my patients about finding those moments during the day when we forget about what happened in the past and we don't worry about what's going to happen in the future, and we focus on the moment right now and focus on finding that peace, finding that happiness, finding that balance. And that looks different for everybody. Meditation is huge if you do that well and if you enjoy it. That's one of the key components to meditation. But for some patients, it's sitting with an adult coloring book. For some, it's snuggling with a child or a grandchild on the couch and just absorbing that love and that cuddle time. For some, it's laying out on a beach or laying out in your backyard in a hammock. So it's intentionally making time to do those things where you just feel centered and relaxed and in the moment. It's not selfish. It's crucially important to decrease that cortisol and to help give our body the time to heal and regenerate. And then other immune supporters, and I'm running out of time, but in the end, and I can try to send this presentation out to patients too. I don't know what we want to do, Ellen. If anybody who wants these slides, you're muted.
Sorry, this will be a part of the recording as well. Okay. So your slides will show up in this recording. So that'll be a great reference. We'll post that on our website. So if anybody wants to revisit this or they want to look at any of these slides one more time, they're welcome to do that.
Perfect. I mean, in the end, if we're eating a largely plant-based diet with whole food sources, a lot of these nutrients are in high quantities in a lot of our food sources as well. And once again, Mother Nature gives nutrients, combinations of nutrients, phytonutrients, vitamins, minerals in beautiful little packages that allows us to absorb them optimally anyway. So I always advocate go to food-based sources first, and then we supplement with anything that we need to beyond that. But things like quercetin, which help to decrease mast cell response or help to decrease allergic response in a more natural way. Quercetin also helps to buttress or support that intestinal barrier. So that's an element that I use a lot. Curcumin is a potent anti-inflammatory, sometimes as beneficial as something like ibuprofen or Motrin. But things like resveratrol, vitamin C gets a bad rap sometimes. There are some Western medicine practitioners who, really tout. I just read something on WebMD the other day. Vitamin C doesn't really do anything for your immune system. Just forget about it. It's not true. It's just that the vitamin C that you're getting over the counter at Walgreens is low dose, and potentially the quality is so poor that, that supplement isn't going to do a whole lot. I use vitamin C routinely, and sometimes in much higher doses. I sometimes use it up to 4,000 or 5,000 milligrams a day for a variety of different health reasons. But vitamin C is incredibly supportive of the immune system. Once again, lots of food sources: oranges and grapefruit, strawberries, even broccoli. But things like selenium. Garlic is antifungal, antiviral, antibacterial. So eating foods with increased garlic is going to really help balance that microbiome and help support the good bacteria while killing off some of that bad stuff that's floating through there. Vitamin D, once again. And then mushrooms. There's a ton of research on the immune supportive anti-inflammatory aspects of especially certain mushrooms, but incredibly high in minerals. Anybody who loves mushrooms, get some from Meyer, start cooking with them again. It's an incredible immune support. So once again, just one of the benefits that I found when I finally found functional medicine, and one of the reasons I continue to work in this field, is it gives back the power of your own health to the individual. And I'm not saying that Western medicine isn't still necessary, not at all. But it also gives us the knowledge that there is a lot that we can control without needing a pharmaceutical company or a surgical procedure or something like that. When we feed our immune system well, when we have the correct nutrients available and able to be well absorbed, as well as when we're able to really ensure that we get good sleep a vast majority of the time, when we're moving intentionally and really taking care of our physical bodies and finding those periods of joy and peace, it's amazing how much all of that can really help heal and buttress and improve our own core health. So the number of times that we do need Western medicine intervention are significantly decreased, and we're just living a more healthy and fulfilled life. And this is what powers me and continues to keep me focused in the area that I work in. So, any questions? Did I make it? Oh my gosh, it's one.
You did a wonderful job. There were a couple other questions left, but what I'm going to do is direct them to your website. Carrie's got an amazing amount of information on there, as well as a contact information that you can submit some of these questions. I think the last one that could be answered quick is, what's the best source of curcumin?
Supplement, unfortunately. So you can cook with curcumin, and curcumin's a wonderful spice, and it gives a lot of flavor. But in the end, when we're looking at the dose that we need to really obtain that true anti-inflammatory effect to the point that it's comparable to Motrin or ibuprofen, it's going to be best with a supplement. So once again, generally with supplements, I generally recommend avoiding getting them at a big box store. It's not saying that all of those are bad. That's not what I'm saying. It's just there's very little control there. The FDA does not regulate supplements. Going to a health food store or working with a provider are kind of your two best bets. There are a number of health food stores in this area, all throughout the country, where you can speak with somebody who's really knowledgeable and can really direct you as well. But that's kind of the best bet, is to kind of work under those two circumstances.
So thank you so much to everyone who has come, and thank you so much to Carrie for doing this. In the chat section, I've put a link to her website. So if you have any further questions, you're welcome to do so. You're also welcome, if you want to watch this again, we'll be posting this video to our website at mindsetpt.com to let everybody know if you want to see some of those slides again, or just review anything that we've discussed. You're welcome to do that. But I can't tell you guys enough how wonderful this was. So thank you everybody for being here. And it's something that we always say at Mindset, we love you more than you know, and I so appreciate everyone's time. So have a wonderful rest of the day. Start to include some of this stuff that Carrie talked about, because you just learned things that you can do right now. All right. So thank you. We're here for you. If you need anything, we appreciate all of you. Thank you again, Carrie.
Thank you so much. Have a great day, guys.
Bye, everybody.